All right, welcome back to episode 6 of the Confluence Podcast. I'm joined with a full studio crew here. We're ready to talk about everything sex and sex wellness and sex toys. And if it has sex in it, we're going to talk about it.
My name is Sifith and I'm the co-host. And we have some other people joining us. We have Damon. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I am the membership outreach coordinator, but at this current moment, I'm just a guest. I'm just a huge fan. This is the greatest moment of my life. I feel like my child is now driving a car and I'm riding with it. It's great.
And Lola, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi there, I'm Lola Casmo. I am currently the Upgrading and Access Representative for CNC Students Union. I am here to share my expertise or opinions on anything sex related. I have experience in working 2 sex retail stores, as well as just my own knowledge from reading up on things because it was my job a couple of times. So yeah, I'm just here to share.
And Savannah?
Hi, I'm Savannah. I am a second year nursing student. And I'm here just to share my thoughts and opinions. I'm bisexual, and I've had both female and male partners. So yeah.
All right, let's get right into it. Let's start off by talking about the stigma related to sex and why people don't talk about it. Who'd like to start?
Oh, I'll jump off here.
Okay.
So I guess the stigma around sex is that not everybody wants to hear about it, I feel like, and it's you need to be almost like in a way that we're here today because we're all comfortable with each other, but it's not always that case. So I think that really the stigma behind sex is very, very much like a personal thing that you have to be comfortable with who you're talking with. And I think that's why it still is. I mean, I'm talking about like it hasn't been. It still is very much a stigma, which, for something that's so beautiful and fun and natural and part of the human existence, it really shouldn't be. I mean, we have so many other things that we could have a stigma on. why is this the one that we still have a sticking point on, like
I think like there's a lot of stigma around it because there's so much judgment that comes with it in our society. And if you talk about it openly, people are judging you and they're talking about you, and so you're afraid of it. Another thing is people talk about other people, so then you're like, they're going to talk about me, and you get afraid and you don't want to share your opinion or what you're doing or what your experience has been. What do you guys think?
I think just the basis of it, the way that people work, right? Everybody's always connected with each other in huge groups, societies and towns are made. So sex is kind of like that one thing that is typically private, depending on what circles you write in, So it's like that intimate bond that's one of the few things that you can actually have with a singular person or somebody you're interested in, maybe not a singular person. But, and there's a certain amount of defensiveness that comes with that. It's like a special connection to a lot of people. So with everything that's personal to you, I can imagine some people would be defensive. I mean, there's a lot of stigma. I mean, people talk about it also. It's like there's a lot of shame involved with it, a lot of comparisons, like who's better at this? What's this better? There's a whole bunch of different aspects like that. It's just a really personal thing that people get really defensive about.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. I mean, I've heard it. So, yeah. What do you think, Savannah?
I feel like also like different types of discrimination come into play as well when we talk about sex, especially when it comes to like older, more traditional views of like what sex should be and what sex is to different people. Because like really people started out being like, oh, it's only heterosexual monogamous relationships. And now like I feel like hopefully we're getting more to an open space where like it can be whatever you define it to be, and it can be with as many people that you want it to be with, and it can be with as many genders as you want it to be with. And it's really more of a sexual revolution rather than just like this stuffy like, oh, this is only for child rearing purposes and like to control women or like some shit like that. It's more like a freeing thing of just this fun like thing that everybody can do if they want to.
No, I totally agree. And I feel like because there's stigma around it, people aren't talking about it, which means it's not as healthy, because if you're not talking about it, you don't know Are you in an abusive relationship? Or is this okay? Is this not okay? Is this normal? Maybe you shouldn't be feeling that way. What do you think, Lola?
Well, I think definitely the stigma heavily relies on what kind of environment you grew up in. If you come from a conservative family, you come from a small town, I feel like being born and raised in Prince George, it was never something that was really spoken about. So I feel like a lot of people have a lot to learn. And that's the thing too, I did want to add on, like, there is such a huge umbrella of what sexual relationships look like these days in comparison to what it used to look like. Um, and I feel like the stigma like definitely relies on, yeah, the child rearing, like, okay, so this is just for procreation. Um, and just how squirmy people get. So like that's always one of my favorite things to do if I'm in a weird social circle. And I'm like, I'll just say something just out there. Cause I don't know, I'm about putting people in those kinds of places because it actually makes you reflect on the things that you want, the things that you need in a relationship. I feel like open discussions about them is great. It's kind of like how people refuse to talk about finances, but what do you think rich people talk about all day? They talk about finances, right? If you want to get better at these things, you want to have a better sex life, you want to have a good, safe sex life as well. Seeing as it's such a trial and error kind of thing to talk about, when they're talking about having abstinence as opposed to having sex education, that's how you end up spreading STIs, all of those kinds of things. And it's so stigmatized, I think, too, because it became, well, it started off as like a territorial thing, right? So it's like, okay, this is mine. Nobody else can have this. And that's still such a mindset that people have. And like, by all means, yes, monogamy, I'm not trying to like slam it or anything like that. But these days, with things like Tinder, things like other dating sites, where it's so readily available for you to pick and choose your buffet, so to say. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to seeing it like becoming a little bit more of an easier thing to talk about. And like when I have conversations with people that don't really talk about it very often, I'm always happy to share like little bits and pieces of information that I have. They're like, oh, I didn't know that they had that. I'm like, yeah, it's a thing. Maybe like look into it, right?
Yeah, you know what I find really disturbing is when people talk about it and then they get called a slut or a whore or they get shamed. I don't agree with it. I don't get it. And it truly bothers me. What's your guys' opinion on that?
I mean, from a male point of view, it's the same as like from a female point of view. It's like, oh, like you did this, like, oh, gross, like, dude, what were you thinking? Like it's just, it goes to like a very much the same way where it's, like the people that are saying these comments, they weren't there, they weren't part of that, and for them to just kind of write you off in one very harsh negative word, or sets of words, I guess is I find like that is just like a quick way to just kill that conversation forever.
No,
And
totally.
I find like when you hear that in like a group setting, like how much does that spread inside of that group, right? Like if you're talking with someone and they're shaming you, 3 other people that just heard that person get shamed are not going to want to talk about it because they're not going to want to get in front of the firing squad, you will, like kind of be in front of that and take all that heat again. So it's like a quick way to stifle a bunch of people. And like I find like that if you're at like a party setting or a social gathering, like it's one of those things where all of a sudden like the entire energy can really change when you're discussing, and then I mean, it always seems to happen. You throw like you throw alcohol or something, some sort of mood enhancing something, and then all of a sudden it becomes very different. It becomes looser lips and conversations start going, and then people are just for the people that do not feel comfortable talking about it, it always seems to end up in shaming for the person who does want to talk about it or is just open to talk about it, right?
No, totally. And I've noticed like if you don't do what they do in porn, then it's not like normal. And it's like, why are you doing that in the bedroom? But porn isn't realistic. That's not actually what happens in the bedroom. What's your guys' thoughts on that?
Oh, I highly agree with that. Porn is like, there are things that specifically, like as I identify as a queer woman, I find that anything like queer woman porn is just entirely unrealistic. There are things that happen in there that are just not a thing whatsoever. That was a conversation that I actually had at my last sex store employer. I was like, that is not a thing. Like she was ordering certain things to come into the store. I'm like, that is not a thing, like at all. So I'm like, that's going to sit on your shelf forever. just letting you know right now.
Savannah, what do you think?
I feel like that really speaks to it because I remember like first starting out being like, maybe I like girls, and like, you know, turning to, because my sex education, I only had one sex education course in my entire public education, and that was in grade 10. And then they were like, this is straight things. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how you should use a condom for AIDS, because our last time my school's sex education was done was the 80s, so it was AIDS centric, and literally we only talked about AIDS.
Yeah.
And then I was like, so what about women? And they're like, that happens too, moving on. And so it was really not an environment to ask questions or be like, so is this okay? And yeah, and so I turned to the internet, being like 14-year-old me, and then, you know, I was like, oh, I see these things and I don't really like these things, and why that doesn't seem practical. And then getting older, realizing, oh yeah, so that never fucking happens. And and looking at other things and being like, oh yeah, so that totally does not work that way that is shown. And just kind of coming to your own preferences and going, okay, so like this is what works for me and this what doesn't, and this is what is just porn and nothing else.
Yeah. No, honestly, I never even thought of that. Like you just brought it up, how like sex education isn't really what's happening. And like they don't talk about people of the same gender that are having sex. Why is it that they only talk about heterosexual people having sex when it comes to sex education in the school system? I think that's frustrating.
And
Damon, what do you think? Or yeah, Zach, go ahead.
I mean, at the heterosexual level, they really don't talk about shit anyway. So it's like they covered a whole bunch of nothing. So, you know, as a heterosexual man, I did not learn fuck all in grade 10. You know, I was like, you know, first of all, no way was I sexually ready at that point. You know, like I'm surprised that it hasn't been like something that kind of evolves through schooling. Because like at grade 10, like, you know, as a stubby, long-haired, overweight kid, like I wasn't, you know, in the zone, you know, per se. But, you know, like when it gets, you know, later in the years where, you know, like grade 12 is there, grade 11, grade 12, you know, for some people that becomes, as you become older, right? Like at 16, I was not I was not there. You know, that was not the thing that was going on. So, but yeah, I find like even in, you know, like Savannah said, like grade 10 education, they brush over, you know, a lot of the you know, the different, you know, genders and sexuality there, but they brush over the heterosexual stuff too. So it's a waste of time all the way around. You know, it's not like all of a sudden I walked out there and I was like, I am thoroughly educated because I'm heterosexual. Like it was like, nope, I'm just as confused as, you know, maybe someone who is a different, you know, has a different sexuality. You know, we're in the same boat of confusion and just like, okay, well, you know, a condom over a banana, yeah, that seems, you know, pretty realistic. You know, it's like, what? You know, it's like one time and then they're like, yep, they got it, sign off on it, this kid knows what he's doing. It's like, no, actually no, I don't think that's, I don't know.
You know, man, it's like this is really why the porn industry is such a problem. I mean, maybe not in the essence of it being existing that's a problem. It's just that it's so much more accessible than sex education. It's why it's so important for this to be a normalized topic, because when it's more accessible to go on your computer and look up porn and and quote unquote learn from that, as opposed to just talking about it normally in schools and the household, you know, then you actually learn. That's why all these negative habits come from. That's where we get all these misconceptions on how people should be treated, how people should react to the horrible comments and such, right? It's just because that type of entertainment, that type of acting is just so much more accessible and easier to find. It takes up 80% of the internet, just pornography, right? So when you have these young kids who don't know any better, that's the only thing they'll learn because their parents just don't want to talk about it. It's such a huge issue, and it leads to a lot of problems like sexual harassment in our colleges, you know, really horrible like sexual occurrences when you're dating. All these horrible experiences stem from just a lack of sex education and willing to talk about it.
And I mean, Damon had a good point with parents. You know, the parents that just brush off, they're like, the school system will take care of it. I don't need to, you know, they're not. Or if the parents, they're not taking care of it. Like you might want to step in here. You know, you might want to step in, put your own spin on something, you know? And I think that's a huge part too, is that like, because it's still, you know, it's stigmatized and people don't want to talk about it. Like I find that you only get it from a couple sources, right? Where I think it's, it's just like writing a paper, you want many sources. You don't want to hear it just from one person, right? You want it from a bunch of different, and like David said, unfortunately, sometimes, like the adolescents get that from porn, which, people will accept wrestling as, a staged performance, but then they go to porn, they're like, that's real. It's like, no. You can't accept that one of them is very much a staged performance, and then the other one is, no, that's real. That's got to be real. It's, it's on the internet. It's too human, but it's like, nope. that can be just as staged and filmed and rehearsed as, any other sort of production.
And
I do have to give a tiny little bit of a kudos to like some of the channels that they have on, I think it's Pornhub that I've seen them, where they actually are providing a little bit of sex education on stimulation and how things are supposed to work. Like I think I saw something about strap-ons 101 or oral sex 101 kind of things, where they're actually speaking about it instead of it just being down right into the scene. Did you order extra sausage on your pizza? So I do have to give a little bit of a nod to that, because I do think that that's really important. I'm just not entirely sure what kind of resources there are available for things like that.
And I feel like there are some resources that are available, because I know like when I first was thinking about like BDSM and that kind of thing, I was looking at like flogging, and with that there was a lot of stuff that was surprisingly on YouTube. I don't know if it is now, because YouTube changes their terms of services constantly. But like, when I was looking at it, when I was like 17 at the time, then I was like, oh, hey, this is actually like educational. And it was just kind of walked you by like step by step. And they're like, this is different things. And like learning about different types of resources, even off social media. Like I remember I was on Tumblr when I was like in my teens, and we're learning about different types of like how candle wax, you don't ever use that, but like these are the good safe waxes, please do not put candle wax on your bare skin, and like that kind of thing was like, oh hey, that's actually educational, because I literally would have just dumped a candle on myself because I was not educated.
Yeah, speaking of BDSM, I will highly recommend checking out FetLife. It's a social media type site, so it helps you find like communities from around the world. They also have a lot of resources on how to talk about safe words, how to talk about making like a contract. I did find a YouTube channel that I'm following, and it's called What's the Safe Word, and they're pretty good. They actually show you a little bit of bondage tying as well. I'd also like to heavily say that if anybody's getting interested in bondage and things like that, that it's going to be a lot of homework and a lot of finding different kinds of rope. And there's so many different types of bondage when it comes to rope tying and things like that. There was a girl that I'd worked with at one of the stores, and she actually had like a whole set of things. She's like, yeah, no, I've tried this and that. I'm like, finally, somebody kinky. We need a kinky person. So like, I think that's really cool. Also, it's not cool to kink shame people.
Yeah, I agree. Don't shame people. Yeah, no. Well, let's get right into the bedroom since you've already started that. Before we go on to sex toys, let's talk about the importance of pleasure for both people that are having sex. I think it's important for everyone to feel pleased. That's involved in the bedroom, even if there's like more than two. I've noticed that like in heterosexual relationships, at least like back in the day, it was like a big thing where like the guy would always like come, but like the girl wouldn't. And it was normalized. And I think that's gross, because they both should be able to. And it's important that they both do. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I
feel like that, yeah.
Go for it.
So I feel with that, like the discussion needs to happen. And that's like where it's so important. I always loved it so much when I was working in a shop where the husband had decided, you know what, my wife, I think I need to get her something like a new toy. So like, what do you have? And just seeing him take that initiative to come in and be like, I know that we're not quite getting there. And like, she says it's fine, but like, I'm having my doubts kind of thing, or like, what can we do to enhance it? So like, I also want to say like going to sex shops and things like that are not just for lonely people. They're there to help you enhance your sexual experience with your partners. Like, such a huge thing that I always wanted to say about that. But discussion is definitely where it starts. Discussion and things that we like to do, things that we don't like to do. And that's why we need to learn to draw our sexual boundaries, right? Because if we have somebody that's into this really weird, like rape kind of scene, that's just wrong. It's extremely wrong, because like seeing as it's something that's portrayed in pornography quite often. Like this is exactly right where we can start talking about boundaries. And boundaries are such an important thing when it comes to your sexual health and your mental well-being, especially if you're in your long-term relationship.
I agree. I think boundaries are really important because then I feel like it enhances and makes it a safe place for like both people to feel like they're important and valid and their feelings matter when they're having sex. David, what do you think? What's your input on this?
Man, I think it's for me, it's as simple as what goes around comes around. It doesn't matter. It's like if there's multiple people, if there's a singular person, you have to put into what you want. It's like it's just not fair.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be that effort. Like some people, they don't always have like the easiest time finishing, for example. But as long as there's an equal amount of effort, I think that's just common courtesy at the very least. It's always been my opinion. It's not. You always hear about these guys, and I've heard from guys too, who like when they talk about their sexual relationships, it's exactly what you described. I go in there, I finish my duty, and then I leave. And it's like that always rubbed me the wrong way. Only because personally, I've always been a lot more personal person. It's a lot more than just orgasms. For me, as even you got that from my first thing, it's obviously a very personal thing to me. That's just how I am around sex, right? So it never made sense to me. I don't know why it's acceptable. You think about it, as long as I would imagine there has to be effort for at least to be like a comfortable sexual relationship between people.
Yeah.
I feel like in some instances, like this is like a personal example. Like I remember there was a girl that I used to go to school with, and her and her partner were struggling to basically he was getting off but she wasn't, and so then they were introducing toys to enhance the experience so they both could get pleasure, and it was seen as a shameful thing, which just was bizarre to me. But it was just like, oh well, he's not doing a good enough job, and I was like, well, no, because everybody has different levels, everyone has different kinks, everybody has different ways that they get off. Some people don't get off from sex, some people have to masturbate, and that shouldn't be seen as a shameful thing. It should all just be normalized and just be like, well, people get off different ways, and if everybody's consenting, it's all, everybody's consenting adults and are all having a good time, then why does it have to be shameful? Why can't it just be the way they do things?
No, I think that's why we're having these conversations, because it starts from having conversations. People listen to these things and then it initiates a discussion in their bedroom or in their house or between people, right? Let's start talking about sex toys. Lola, do you want to talk about sex toys?
Yeah. So I would like to kind of just see if we can do like a round table as to what kind of things have you tried? What things did you like? What things you didn't like? We don't have to be very specific about brands or anything like that, or maybe just in general what anybody's tried, just so I have an idea of what to talk about.
I've tried a clit stimulator and a vibrator. Those are the only two things I've ever tried. I enjoy both of them. I wouldn't say like one more over the other. I think they both please me in different ways. So yeah. What about you guys?
I've definitely tried a cock ring. Definitely, it's one that I continue to use just because I enjoy the sensation that it gives.
Mm-hmm. Damon?
For me, it's a tough. I have never used one myself. I've used sex toys with other people. People who do have like their preferred vibrator or their preferred toy of choice. I've never. I guess I would just have to say I'm privileged enough that I didn't find myself needing, and I just feel satisfied enough that I didn't go into it. There's no reason as to why I haven't. It's definitely something that I'm open to. It's never come across me personally as something I should have. So I'm willfully ignorant right now. I'll admit. I'm here to learn. Let's learn about some stuff, Yeah.
Love that. Savannah, what about you?
So For myself, I've used let me think, vibrators, dildos, clit stim, also like a vibrator that's like Bluetooth connected, so my partner can use it far away, which that's really cool. And then also with people, candle wax, ropes, ceiling hang swing thing, floggers, I guess riding crops, cock rings. I'm trying to think. Gags, blindfolds, handcuffs, butt plugs. I think there's more. I can't remember the rest.
All right, well, there's your table.
I realized the error of my ways here because I should have probably opened up with the things that I'm familiar with. So I've used strap-ons, I've used dildos, I have wands, air stimulation, also floggers, and riding crops. So by the way, if you can't find any good whips, check out Spruce Capital Feeds in Prince George. You'll find some nice equestrian stuff there. They give you a little bit of a weird look, but it's fine. I am into like harnesses and things like that as well. And I also actually have a cock ring for my dildos, a vibrating one. Lubricants, I've tried different kinds of lubricants, water-based, more of stimulation-based lubricants, massage oils, massage candles. What else? I think that's about it right now. I do have like a whole bunch of like restraints and stuff like that. So that was something I'm still working on right now. It just never really get to that point where I have to put a bunch of work into getting the restraint system working and get it all set up on the bed. So it's just another one of those things where it just feels kind of strenuous. You'd be like, okay, well, I kind of just want to do this now. So from there, I think I would like to talk, and butt plugs. Yes, butt plugs, vibrating butt plugs, glass butt plugs, metal, and silicone. So there's like a whole bunch of different kinds of materials of everything. So I think with that being said, I would like to start on maybe talking about male stimulation. So starting with male stimulation, I'd probably like to talk about strokers. One of them being the more popular ones is going to be the fleshlight. So it's shaped like a flashlight, and it's kind of got like a little end to it like this. So it'll either be shaped, they can be shaped like a mouth, they can be shaped like a vagina, they can be shaped like an anus. So those are really cool. You can adjust how tight it is. So for like the suction, whatnot. And they're also very easy to clean. So they're some of them are actually really discreet too. They kind of look like just this random little lamp that can sit on like your bedside table. So I think I really like that aspect of it. So those are like more of a manual kind of stroker where you be kind of using your motions to use it like that. Also, there are ones that do provide some stimulation in the sense that on the inside, there's a little inner working. Some of them kind of rotate on the inside. Other ones have more suction. Some of them actually thrust a little bit as well. And we do have some voice automated ones. So you'll have some like, oh, right there. Like, so those are pretty cool. Also, with that being said, strokers, we do have like full on torso type sets as well if you don't want to do the stroking. So you can lay it down on a bed, things like that. So they're shaped like the vagina and the anus and like the waist kind of area. Again, like there are also different positions to that as well. So some of them are shaped more missionary, some of them are shaped from in behind, some of them are shaped from the side. And the one of the stranger kind of things that I found was a foot stroker. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And of course, the sex dolls, like they definitely go up. I know locally you can get them for about $3,500 from the store. So that was along the lines of strokers for men. There are also, cock rings. Cock rings are really awesome. They're really good. A lot of people kind of ask what they're about. Cock rings, essentially, they help keep all the blood flow in the penis to keep it erect. Kind of adds a little bit of desensitizing so it can last longer as well. So that's pretty cool. There's vibrating ones. You can also get them in different kinds of sizes. You can get them in different styles. So with that being said, we can also move into sleeves. So there are actual penis sleeves. They kind of go over the shaft. So they'll enhance the shaft, whether it be making it thicker or giving it a little bit more texture, adding more length in some cases, actually. So from sleeves, you kind of move into something more like pumps. I will highly recommend pumps for erectile dysfunction and anybody who has heart issues or anybody who has diabetes, because a good majority of the time, if you have diabetes or if you have heart issues, you can't actually take enhancers like Viagra or Cialis. There are off-brand erection pills as well that they sell at sex shops. Also, with that being said, as we're talking about pills, there are desensitizers, so that be sprays and or wipes that you kind of wipe over the penis so you can last longer. Some of them actually add a little bit more girth as well. So like penis creams with girth, penis creams for desensitizing. There are ones that actually include pheromones as well that are supposed to like just drive people just wild. I actually have my own like body spray that I've bought, just like you spray it on parts where you have a little bit of a pulse, so like on the wrists, on the neck, and it's supposed to enhance, like people just randomly kind of just be drawn to you. It's kind of interesting to see for sure. Yeah, I think that's what I have to cover for male toys. Female toys, I'll always highly recommend a wand. Wands are great for clitoral stimulation. Penetration wise, there are some really cool like bunny rabbit ones. So they'd shape like this would be the inserted, this would be over the top, that kind of goes over the clitoris. And those are really cool toys. Another thing I'd like to add about vibrators for women is if you have a toy that's like kind of straight, but it has that little curve at the very end of it, that's actually more of a G-spot stimulator. So G-spot stimulators are also really good because I had no idea about my G-spot. I was only ever used to clitoral climaxes, not G-spot climaxes. So like when I finally did, it was like, oh, like it was one of those moments for me for sure. And yeah, dildos, it's great. Dildos, I'd like to talk about dildos just really quickly. There are densities to dildos. So some of them are a little bit more hard, stiff, whatnot. And those are probably be called singular density. We have dual density. Dual density is a little bit more of a stiffer kind of shaft to it. It does have a little bit of a softer outside, more jelly-like. I would say that'd be our dual density. And then we have triple density. Triple density is very, very soft. So in some cases, you're going to want to make sure you go by brand for triple density, because I know there was a brand that we carried at one point where like if you just bent it a little bit too much, it would snap. So like there'd be nothing more disappointing than having your dildo break on you. But yeah, triple density is very soft. I'd say dual density is like a medium, and then for like singular density would be just really stiff. So yeah, I think that's what I have to say about sex toys right now.
That spray sounds so cool. That's what I was thinking. Also, are there any apps that people can use?
As Savannah was saying before, she has a toy that she can use with her phone. That is actually the brand that I know of is called We Vibe. So they have multiple toys. Like they have multiple toys for men and for women. So for men, they do have more prostate kind of things, but they also do have a cock ring as well. So it's a vibrating cock ring. And they have like a whole schwack of things for women, of course, because that's just how it is right now. But I'm starting to see a lot more evolution in male sex toys. So I've been thinking that that's been pretty awesome. Especially right now in the time of COVID, dating has been very difficult for a lot of people.
I can see that. I can definitely see that. All right. Do we want to talk about safe sex?
What does safe sex mean to everybody?
I think when I think of safe sex, I think ensuring if it's like a heterosexual partners, like a male and a female, that you're being safe with not getting pregnant if you don't want to be. Not spreading STIs, getting checked regularly, using condoms, and cleaning your toys regularly. I think those are some of the things I think of when I think of safe sex. What about you guys?
When I think of safe sex, I usually think of those kinds of things like contraceptives and like preventing STIs, as well as like cleaning toys, taking care of that. And I also think of things like consent and
Yeah.
taking people's emotional health into consideration as well as physical health. As well as talking about like do's and don'ts. Like there's people who have hard nose and everybody has different hard nose. And like it's good to know that and talk with your partner ahead of time, so then you're not in the middle of something and then you're like, oh well, now you're crying, and like talking about like that trauma that people may have. And those are really difficult conversations to have with your partner, but sometimes they're really necessary depending on the play that you're doing. And it's really important to have that discussion ahead of time so that no one gets hurt in the end.
Yeah, and I like the point that Savannah makes about having it ahead of time. It's not
Yeah.
not when it's the heat of the moment. That's not the time just to be like, okay, hold on, let's talk about this. Let's back up a second. Like that's unfortunately sometimes it does happen in that sense. But like I think just safe sex to me is being upfront and being really making yourself vulnerable to what you want, right? To really not have a shell, to open up and be like, okay, well, this is me all on the table here, and let's talk about what we want. Because I mean, sex comes down to it, it's very much a pleasurable thing, and if you don't want to talk about what can make it more pleasurable, then you're really you're selling the whole experience a bit short if you're not willing to really be like, okay, well, let's talk about the yeses and the nos so that we can try to have the ultimate performance, right? There's no sense hiding something for it to come out later and potentially ruin a moment or ruin an experience or something like that. So
I always think of like yes is yes, a maybe is no, and is a no. Everything that's not a yes is a no. I know it's all around the posters around the college and university, but it stuck with me. Damon, what about you? What do you think of when you think of safe sex?
I just think there's so many aspects to it. I actually really appreciate Savannah talking about the consent part of it, the social part of it, because there's always the technical parts, which is like how to stop spreading STIs, how to not have an unexpected pregnancy. But I think the most important part is the social stuff that Zach and Savannah have touched upon. I mean, there's all the other aspects. I think it's, to me, is just being aware about everything possible and responsible and taking responsibility for it. Like maybe you have a partner who does have STIs. You don't want STIs. How are you going to go about it? What other things can you do? Maybe penetrative sex isn't an option, but there should be other aspects to it as well. It's just being considerate. It is being responsible. It's not always the technical aspects, which is what I hear covered all the time. There's so much more to it. I think it covers a broad spectrum of things. At least that's what it means to me.
Yeah, I think it's important to get tested. Sorry, good.
You spoke first.
I was gonna say, I also think it's important to get tested regularly. Like, there's so much shame around like if you have an STI that like you're dirty or like you didn't do it right or you've slept around, and it comes back to the stigma. And I think it's important to have those conversations out loud because like that's not true. STIs happen and it's okay. And whether or not it's curable, it's okay. And it's safe for you to talk about it, Maybe I think like I'm a healthcare worker, but I think everyone should talk about it and normalize it, You hear, like I hear about it way more than I would have thought I would have heard about it since I'm a nurse. I think more people feel comfortable talking about it with me. That being said, I see people are ashamed to tell other people, and it makes me sad because it is something that should be normalized, and you should never feel ashamed to talk about it,
Yeah, and I feel like the people that end up like having one of these infections or diseases, they end up feeling really self-conscious about not being able to talk about it, right? And I mean, in my line of work, like I deal with the people that don't always have the healthiest habits, but when it comes out in conversation, it's not like like I never like recoil to the fact of it. I'm just like, oh, okay, like that's fine, and it actually takes people back. People are like, wait, you're not sickened by this? And I'm like, well, no, like it's the way it is, like, yeah, that's you and this is me, and we this doesn't change what I think of you. This doesn't change the outlook that people should have on you. and being, that's where I like to tell them, like, hey, like, you have this, but it doesn't mean that you need to continue, who gave it to you. You don't always have to pay this part forward. Maybe this can be, you can, be the beacon, if it is something that is incurable, right, can be the beacon of information and, support for others, and for the stuff that is curable. I mean, like, look at us at CNC. We have the Wellness Center. I mean, they do that. We have Foundry, Prince George in town. I'll make sure to drop all the links in the description. Like, those are all places that are designed for people that, might not want to go to a family doctor, or don't have a family doctor for that matter. Like, good luck trying to get a doctor right now. It's almost impossible. So,
And it's COVID.
And it's COVID. So it's like, what, you're not going to get tested because you can't get a doctor. Like, that's not, that shouldn't be your barrier for that. And there's like you said, there's healthcare professionals, like, Civith and, other people around the community, right, that this is what they practice in. But I mean, when you talk to somebody and you see that they're comfortable to talk about it, or even, like for me in the instance, if, if someone approaches me, like a male approaches me and is like, hey, like, I have these issues, with this certain aspect of, my sexual health or whatever. It's like, okay, let's find the resources to help you. Cause like, I'm in no way a doctor, I can't help you, I can't do that. But at the same time, I'm not going to be like, well, it's your problem. And, it's like that I think is what closes a lot of doors for people, and then they don't want to talk about it. And then it becomes hidden, and especially if you're wanting to get into a relationship, no matter what type of relationship it is, that's going to be, if you've been, that door has been slammed in your face so many times, you're not going to want to bring that up, the first time you're starting to talk about things, which I think, becomes dangerous in a sense, because now you're having someone considering, well, if I just, if I don't bring it up right away, or I'll bring it up at some point, and maybe some point never happens, right? So I think just having that open communication and not being, like, so, people have, like, you don't give someone the gears for having a cold sore. It's like, well, that's, whatever, like, that's, you're dealing with that, that's, whatever. But, but then on the flip side of that, you have people that are just like, oh, it's dirty. And it's because, and a lot of the times, I mean, like back like Savannah was saying in the 80s, like, I mean, men were getting AIDS because of the gay sex, it was, that was the reason, that was the only reason. And it's like, well, the information was not correct there, and does that, information like that, and, shaming that goes around, improper information like that, just shuts the doors for communication, right? And I feel like a lot of, men in probably the older generations, like, like my father and stuff like that, like that was a time where talking about, differences in sexual health, that wasn't really a thing, right? That was you go to the doctor on your own time, you don't talk to anybody, you just look down, and that's it. You're not, it wasn't something to be like, oh, well, maybe I'll seek out help from others, on something, remedies, or what worked, or just having, like Lola was saying, having, a network or a community of people that, have had, or still, have these, diseases or infections, and continue to, live a, productive and healthy sexual and non-sexual lifestyle, right? It doesn't mean just because you get, you have it once or you have it forever, it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. And I think that is really the kind of the stigma on that, which I'm glad there's centers, and, like us at CNC, we have like the Wellness Center and Foundry, like they're open doors, for people to come in and be like, listen, I've had no one to be able to talk to about these things. And they're like, okay, perfect, you're in the right place, and I think that just having that safe haven is really, important, and especially with the younger generations, right? Like, it should become more normalized, is what I'm trying to say.
No, I agree.
And I feel like
Go ahead.
I feel like okay, I'll say my point quick. But I feel like Zach brings up I feel like Zach brings up a good point with how dangerous stigma can be. Cause I'm like, I know I've had partners where like they don't bring it up at all. And then you're like, okay, so we're starting to get up to this point. And then they're like, oh, well, this is a surprise. And then I'm like, if we talked about this ahead of time, we could have talked about it ahead of time. Like, you know what I mean? And like how we talked before about talking about all this stuff ahead of time. And stigma really, like Zach said, puts up those doors where they're like, well, I don't want to talk about that ahead of time because I feel bad about it and I feel shameful about it. When really the stigma around STIs, it shouldn't be about that. Really, as long as you're honest with your partner, then it shouldn't be a shameful thing. if you're being honest and you're coming from a place of I want your health to be priority and I want my health to be priority, then there shouldn't be anything shameful about that.
I really like how you pointed that out. I agree. Yeah, no, totally. Well, what do you think?
So like just along the terms of like safe sex, definitely by all means, consensual, and having conversations is so important, having discussions, knowing that certain things might trigger them. Like knowing that there is sexual trauma in somebody's past as well is something that you definitely need to acknowledge if they've been sexually assaulted before. Like these are important conversations to have because we want everybody to have good sex. We want people to have consensual sex. We want people to have meaningful sex, right? So that's like, it's just such an emotional thing to be sharing with another person sometimes. Not all the time, mind you, but like sometimes it is. And sometimes these can like heal you for the better as well. And along the same lines of safe sex, if you're into BDSM and things like that, you really need to acknowledge that there is an aftercare that takes place as well. So like, yes, these are my kinks. I like to do these things, but you need to consider that your partner needs some extra aftercare, whether that be cuddling, running them a bath, making them a meal, things like that. So I just wanted to make sure that aftercare is such an important thing. It's like anything with BDSM.
Yeah, I think we should end off this podcast by talking about if you could give your younger self or someone else one piece of advice. I know we're not experts, or something you'd want to hear, what would it be? I'll start off. I never got a sex education personally because I went to a private school up until I was in grade 8. So shout out to my best friend Brianna for being my sex educator. And in my high school, you had to get a permission slip signed. So we faked our mom's signature, me and my brother. That being said, if I could give my younger self advice, I would say you don't have to be married to have sex. And it's okay to have sex with more than one person.
Definitely for my younger self, I would probably be like, hey, you might want to look into the whole liking girls thing. And because I was very in the dark. My parents are not accepting of that, so I was very in the dark about that. And so basically just doing that, as well as just like being like, hey, as long as you're being safe, you won't get pregnant immediately. Because for whatever reason, sex education really emphasized like, don't get pregnant, and you will get pregnant immediately and there's no turning back. Once you're pregnant, that's it. And it was like me being like 15 learning about that. I was like, oh my God, I'm never going to have sex for my entire life. I'm going to have sex one time to have one child, and that is it. I'm never having sex again. And and it was a really like terrifying thing in like when I was 15 looking at that, like, oh God. But like, as long as you're being safe and as long as, you know, you're doing everything you can to prevent STIs or, you know, subdrop, anything like aftercare, that kind of thing, consent issues, as long as you're having conversations with your partner and you're doing contraceptives, it's okay. Like, you can reduce the anxiety a little bit and have fun. And, you know, mistakes do happen. And when mistakes happen, it's not just an end all be all. There's always a plan B. There's always, you know, abortion clinics or adoption or something like that. Or, you know, talking to a doctor about an STI that you think you might have acquired or you have acquired. And it's always open to have those conversations with healthcare workers, because honestly, like going into the Foundry and for like the very first time to get like STD testing, I was like, oh God, like it's going to be the worst experience of my life. They're going to call me a slut and think I'm disgusting. And then they were just like, hey, welcome to the Foundry. And they were like super open and nice. And it's okay to talk to healthcare workers. They've seen it all, and, you know, and they're there to help you. That's their job. So.
And I think, like Savannah says, like the healthcare workers, like they're there for you. They're not there to just be like, oh, here's another disgusting person, get in the chair, you know, we're dealing with this now, you know, like it's not like that. Like for most of them, or the ones that I've met, like they're really proactive. They're like, okay, like thank you for telling me. Now I can, you know, now we can help you. And not just in the way where it's like, all right, take penicillin, you're good, get out of here, you know, kind of thing. It's more, you know, like also like the mental aspects behind it. Be like, okay, like you want to, you know, was this a trauma? Was this, you know, and maybe be able to help kind of the whole, because you know, like taking care of like the biological side of it. Sure, that's, you know, that's good. Like that's got to happen. But if you leave the mental of what might have, you know, the mental side of what, you know, happened, the emotions, the mental health, and you're just like, well, that doesn't get fixed by a pill. That's on your, you know, that's your own problem. You know, like I think like a lot of like healthcare, you know, practitioners are starting to become more open to dealing with it as a whole approach more than just a one-sided approach. And I guess if I could, you know, to my younger self, the race to lose virginity, that is fucking bullshit. That is bullshit. Yeah, thanks, Damon. Woo, let's go. You know, like, and especially on the male side, holy fuck. I don't know where that came up. I don't know why that was a thing. And I mean, like, you know, I was always, you know, it's like, holy fuck, like someone's, you know, it's like NASCAR, you know, people are like behind you and then all of a sudden they're like, okay, yeah, like I'm passing. It's like, fuck, like I gotta figure out how to do sex sooner because this person and I gotta, you know, and it just becomes like this vicious cycle to the point where, you know, like my first time wasn't optimal. I mean, it was with someone that I didn't, you know, particularly have, you know, like feelings for in the long term, and it just felt very rushed, and to the point where it was kind of after it was done, I was like, oh, what the fuck was that for? You know, like it was kind of like, why did I just rush the hell out of that? Like, you know, and it wasn't until like, you know, like I met my wife now that it's like, oh, that's what it really means when everything clicks together. You know, when it's not just, you know, when it's not just the physical, but it's also the emotional, and you put it together, it's like, whoa, that is a whole different energy. That's a whole energy system that's completely different than just, you know, the foot race to, you know, to try to be the, you know, the first one after high school or in high school or out of your friends. And, you know, it just becomes like this big, and what I found is that once the virginity race was kind of like broken in my friends, all of a sudden it was like these horror stories started coming out, and we were all like, fuck. Like there was like 1 out of 6 of us that actually had an enjoyable moment, and the rest of us were just in this toxic foot race to try to somehow, you know, like alpha each other and just try to be. And now it's, you know, it's funny when we talk about it in retrospect. It's kind of like, oh wow, I'm really glad I stressed out and worried about that, and it didn't really, you know, for some, like obviously like some people their first time is great, and I mean like more power to them, but I mean for the people that, you know, had this race to try to finish it, and especially the, you know, from a male point of view, I mean that toxicity that comes with that, you know, first one to get laid, first one to lose their virginity, like good God, like fuck, there's so many other things to worry about, you know, and use that energy on that. I just, if I could tell my 16-year-old self, I'd be like, okay, listen, fall back in the running a little bit and just wait it out, because it'll be way better if you wait it out.
I want to go next because I think I have 2 answers. Part of it's from Zach. I 100% agree. I didn't think about that until now. Yeah, no, absolutely. That is just a social stigma that runs rampant across a lot of society. You know, I personally think I lost my virginity way too young for the exact same reason that Zach was talking about. I'm sure I was terrible. I was definitely not ready. I was definitely not educated enough for that sort of thing, for that personal connection. There's a whole bunch of aspects I was totally ignorant of. You know, I just doubt it was as good a time as it possibly could be. Now, my actual advice to my younger self would be though, just to be a little bit more open-minded. You know, in the sense, like, if people who know me, like on face level, I'm a very reserved person. You know, talking about this doesn't come normal to me, and that's not a family thing. My family is actually really open about this stuff. It's just I'm just that type of person. You know, talking about this sort of thing while I'm able to, you know, it just doesn't come up. Like, really, it's something that I keep very private, and I'm sure there's a lot of people like that too. You know, it's not an easy thing to talk about by any means. It's why I think this podcast in particular is so important, because, you know, I'm sure that there are a lot of people who will check this out and who wouldn't normally talk about it, and hopefully they learned a lot. I'm probably like those people. You know, it's keep an open mind. Don't feel ashamed about things. Like, I'm such a private person. A lot of people don't even know I'm bisexual. Like, that's just something I don't tell people. You know, I am. I'm not hiding it by any means. It's not a surprise. It's just I'm a reserved type of person. There are people like me who are reserved, but there should still be some. This conversation should still be had. You know, and I like the value. Sometimes other people have to say it. You know, maybe that's how they learn. But if you're able to talk about it in a comfortable environment, I urge you to. You know, it's not an easy thing, whether by religious means, cultural means. You know, it should still be thought about. It'll just improve your life altogether.
I never thought about that, but now it kind of makes sense. Like I was reflecting on myself, Damon, while you were talking, and I think like I'm very extroverted, and even like this type of thing makes me uncomfortable, which is why I wanted multiple people in the podcast. Because I was like, it's uncomfortable, and like now it's like out there, and I'm thinking it's out there, and but it's good to have these conversations. But yeah, like even I'm very extroverted, I'm very open about a lot of things, but like when it comes to my sexual life and what I do in the bedroom, those things make me uncomfortable, and it's hard for me to talk about too. Yeah. Okay, Lola, your turn.
So I think the piece of advice I would like to give myself at a younger age would be that it's okay to be vulnerable with another person. I tend to keep myself as a very guarded person, but like once people get me talking, I can actually keep talking about things and like how I'm feeling about things, whatnot. But yeah, no, I think the biggest thing I would say is like, don't be afraid to be vulnerable with another human being. Also that you don't have to be drunk to have sex with people, because when I lost my virginity, I was definitely drunk, and I was at a younger age. I did lose my virginity at a like older age for sure. But it wasn't really impressionable. And being queer, I slept with a man to lose my virginity, and it wasn't really ideal whatsoever. And it was just kind of one of those things where I felt that there was a stigma around. I actually would get judged from other queer women that I had been talking to through the internet, that, oh, well, how do you know that like you don't like men if you've never slept with them? I'm like, well, because I just don't. And like it is very apparent to this day that like, yeah, no, I really don't like men. And yeah, just like don't be afraid to explore things, and communicate, like tell people what you don't like, because like I've had a lot of bad sex as well, where I've kind of been like, I should have probably told them that I didn't like that, because like that really sucked, and it left a really bad impression on me for future partners for sure. Yeah, that's the advice that I would give myself. Just be vulnerable and communicate.
Thank you for joining our podcast, guys. Zach, you're gonna do the outro?
Yeah, I got it.
It was my pleasure.
We're probably gonna cut this part out. He said I don't want to do the outro. Okay.
Well, we're cutting this part out. This is the best part.
Okay, we're gonna do a rerun of this. Thank you so much for joining our podcast. I appreciate you guys all coming on here and sharing your experiences and your non-expertise advice.
You're
We just
welcome.
want to mention that we're not experts at this. Please go to a healthcare professional if you need any educational help or have any questions.
And I think as the viewers, as you've seen, we're all open individuals, and we are both on and off the podcast. So anybody that's in this podcast, like feel free to reach out to us. I mean, as you saw, Lola's our leading expert on everything density and dildos and all that fun stuff. So like I know for me personally, like I'm going to Lola. I'm going to the expert here. I'm not fucking around trying to figure out what's going on. And I think like having people like that are so they're the gems. Lola, you're the gem.
Why, thank you.
It's like
I feel that.
having people that are in that in that area, and they're just like super comfortable to talk about it. And I mean, we all have our strengths, right? I mean, when we see that, right, we all come from different sexual backgrounds and experiences and life stages. So if any of you viewers out there resonate with one of us and you want to talk about it, or you want us to do another show about this, you want to come on, you want to come talk about this shit, let's do it. Like I don't care, we'll do 10 episodes if we have to, like let's get the conversation going. And really that's about anything. So
it will fit in the budget, don't worry. We got
yes,
enough room for another
David's
show.
gonna make the budget work. We can
don't worry,
episodes.
I checked the budget, we got enough in there.
He's gonna crunch the numbers, and this is gonna go to the moon, so we're good. All right, thanks for joining us, guys. This is episode 6 of the Confluence Podcast, and we'll see you next time. Make sure to click that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you don't miss an episode. And make sure to check out the links in the description for everything Confluence.